I would say the thing that makes it worth it the most is, my husband and I have a lot of really fun, interesting memories together, and it brought us a lot closer together and sort of healed things that needed healing, after losing my mom and all of that. I think it changed our relationship.
Welcome to the Crossing It Off podcast, where we believe living with intention through a bucket list lifestyle is a great way to bring yourself personal joy. As you are crossing items off your list, you're actually filling up your bucket. The more items you cross off, the more joy gets added, until eventually your joy spills over into the lives of those around you. Now let's start crossing it off together. Have you ever gone into crossing something off your bucket list, and after you're done, find out that you got something that you weren't expecting out of it? Our bucket list storyteller today did just that. She set an ambitious goal with her husband, and when they were done completing it, they had the satisfaction of crossing that item off. But even more so, there was healing, and there was newfound respect between them, and they got a lot more out of it than they thought they would. Let's learn how she did that and start crossing it off. At this time, I'd like to welcome our bucket list storyteller, Amanda Kernahan. And she describes herself as a writer, an entrepreneur, and an aspiring van lifer. Amanda, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, so tell our listeners, what did you cross off your list?
Becoming a 46er.
Okay. I was not familiar with that when I saw it on the form. So what is becoming a 46er?
I live in New York State, and that's an entire state, not just the city. So in upstate New York, we have a mountain range called the Adirondacks. And there's a challenge that if you hike all 46 of the highest mountains in the Adirondack mountain range, which are the highest mountains in New York State, then you are deemed a 46er and you get a special patch and you join this special organization. And it's a pretty elite group of people, in my humble opinion.
Yeah. Can you tell me how many people have done that? Do you know that
Well,
number?
my number, when I completed in 2020. And so my 46er number is 12,768. My husband is 12,769. So we were within the first 13,000 people to accomplish it. So it's not a tiny number, but it still feels like a pretty big accomplishment.
That's still a pretty tiny number. New York has a pretty sizable population, along with states that are, Pennsylvania and everything else that's connected to it. So I'm sure that other people from outside the state attempt this as well. Mm-hmm. Is this something that you did completely together, or were you both kind of like, through the first 10 or 12 and then finally decided that you're going to do it together?
We did this entire thing together. We decided together that we were going to do it on our first hike. We hadn't planned to go after this originally, but once we decided, we did every hike together. And if we ever went hiking by ourselves with other friends, we would do a hike we had already done together and repeat a mountain so that we weren't getting a new one without the other one.
That is absolutely incredible. How did you all come to that decision that this was something that you were going to do?
Honestly, I wasn't a hiker at all. When I started this entire thing, we started back in 2010, and my brother invited us to go on a hike in the Adirondacks. And it was shortly after our mom had died. And so my brother knew I was kind of struggling and asked me if I wanted to get outside, and said he's hiking this mountain with his girlfriend. And so my husband and I joined, and unexpectedly, because I was not athletic, I didn't run, nothing, I absolutely fell in love with it. And so did my husband. And it was like it felt like the biggest accomplishment. I think our first hike was 12 hours. And when we left that day, I think we knew we were going to be back a lot. And we decided we were going to go for it and do all 46.
So you were aware of this challenge before you started your first hike?
Vaguely. My brother had mentioned it, something about how, my girlfriend and I might want to do this challenge. It's all 46 mountains. And I didn't understand what it entailed until we did our first mountain. And it's not easy, but I was pretty inspired to try and do it myself and race him to the finish.
Did you beat him?
We sure did, yeah.
There you go.
Yeah, what's funny, I wanted to listen to one of your shows before I came on, and I listened to the Kilimanjaro episode. And it was funny because she said, like, be careful if you're hiking with a partner because it can break you up. And I was like, I had the opposite experience. It really brought us closer together, and we had such growth in our relationship from hiking together. But I can see how it could go the other way because it can be stressful. Yeah, someday, we want to do some of the long trails like the PCT or the AT, but with our kids, we're just waiting for them to grow up. That's why I said I'm an aspiring van lifer, because I can't do it until my kids grow up.
Listen to you can get an RV.
Yeah.
So describe these 46 mountains, like at least like give us like a range of
Yeah.
elevation to kind of give us a kind of sense of what it's like.
So the original plan for the 46 is they were going to have all the 46 mountains that are over 4,000 feet elevation in New York State. And it turns out upon like remeasuring, some of them come in just under, but they are still included because that's what the original 46 were created as. And there's one, I think one or two that are over 5,000. And they're very rugged. They're not, if you've hiked out west, they're not like a lot of switchbacks. They're straight up the mountain and lots of rocks and roots. And, you're scrambling up a rock slide or something like that. And some of them can take 12 or 13 hours. There's lots of mud. We've gone in the winter with ice and snow. And so definitely not easy.
So what was the preparation for you like? I mean, did you once you said, okay, we're going to do this, we're going to do all 46, did you get on some kind of meal plan or, you know, exercise routine to like make sure, like, did you plan it out, like how long it was going to take you? How long did it take you?
I don't think we were that intentional with our planning at first.
Okay.
We did buy a lot of gear at the beginning because on our first hike we brought nothing really, and you learn quickly that that's not sufficient. But it took us 10 years to finish it, which was not the plan originally. I think we had hoped it would take shorter, but we did have a baby in that time, and we live about 4 to maybe 5 hours from the mountains, and so we have to drive. We would drive to my dad's house outside of Albany, drop off our daughter. We would get up at 4 a.m., drive to the mountains, which was 2 hours from my dad's, hike all day, drive back to my dad's, get our daughter, come back to where we live, which is 4 hours from there. So it was a lot of logistics and planning for us. I think more than the equipment and like the exercise and everything, it was a lot of planning for timing, like when could we get there? And that's why we hiked in every kind of weather, because if we had a weekend that was free and we could get a hike in, we were going to do it. And it didn't matter what the weather was because that was the time that we had.
So two questions out of that. One, what was your original time frame that you thought you might get it done in?
I think I originally had said I wanted to finish by the time I turned 30. And so that would have been about 4 or 5 years. And yeah, it took double that.
Now, since your daughter was born, have you taken her with you at all, or is this still something just you and your husband do?
For the most part, it's me and my husband's thing. We've brought the kids, they've done 2 high peaks, and they complained a fair amount. They do some of the hiking in some of the smaller mountains in New York. We've taken them on. There's different challenges like the Saranac 6 and Lake Placid 9. And so we'll take them on some of the smaller hikes, but the high peaks are really strenuous and long. And so they just haven't had the interest. So mostly it's just it's our date kind of thing that we do now.
No, that's totally cool. I love it. Tell us like what was like one of your least favorite peaks and like what was one of your most favorite peaks and why?
My least favorite peak is called Redfield Mountain. We planned that day to climb Cliff and Redfield. So there were two mountains we were going to get together. They're done together a lot. But we were going in early spring. And that's the worst time to hike in New York because that's when snow is melting and it's very unpredictable what kind of terrain you're going to get. And we made a really bad mistake. We were in the parking lot and it was like 70 degrees and it had been really nice that week. And we were like, do we really need our snowshoes? I mean, it's so beautiful. It's been really nice. And we left our snowshoes in the car and it was the worst mistake I've ever made with hiking. It's embarrassing to say that I didn't bring them with me because then there was so much snow once we got higher up in
Mhm.
elevation.
Oh yeah.
And we were post holing and then we lost the trail at one point and we came across this guy came up behind us and he's like, oh no, am I following people who are lost? And we're like, yeah. And yeah, so then like we had to bushwhack part of it, which is something I had never done, and we were post holing while we were doing it. And I think I started to cry, and I was like, "We're never gonna get it." And so we did make it to the top of that one. We abandoned Cliff, which was the second half of that hike, and that was definitely the worst. My favorite was Giant Mountain, and that one my husband and I did together. It was just a quick, like we were on the peak by 9:30 in the morning.
Hmm.
There was a cloud inversion, and so we were like sitting above the clouds, and it was perfect weather. And there's just something about that day and that hike that we both really loved.
Here at the Crossing It Off podcast, we are passionate about inspiring you in your bucket list lifestyle and empowering you to live out your list. We offer many resources to assist you in your bucket list journey, such as web resources in the show notes, bucket list mentoring services, my book Live Out Your Lists, a private Facebook group for you to share your bucket list success stories with others, and more. All of these can be found at crossingitoffpodcast.com. Find the resource that fits your need so that you can live out your list. Now back to the show. So you mentioned a term that I'm not familiar with. So post holing, what is post holing?
So that's when you aren't wearing snowshoes, which you should, and because you can damage the trails and it's also very dangerous. But when the snow starts to melt, your boot, the weight of you can form like you take a step in the snow and it plummets into like a hole that you make with your shoe. And sometimes you can go down as far as your waist. Sometimes you go down as far as your chest, depending on how deep the snow is. It's just you don't know the integrity of the snow beneath you. And that's why snowshoes are really important.
Yeah, for sure. Not just crampons, but actual.
Right.
Yeah.
Yes, have everything.
Once you were done, like after you had completed this, was it worth it when you were completed and you were done and you crossed all 46 of these peaks off? What was it worth it? Did you look back and if so, what was that thing that made it so worth it for you?
It was absolutely worth it. And I think the only downside to it is that there are none left that we haven't done. And so that's a little disappointing. But we finished on Whiteface Mountain, and we actually had held that as our last peak on purpose because there's a road that goes up it. And so my plan was that my dad could come up with the kids and meet us at the top as we finished. But then COVID happened and we finished in 2020. And so the road was closed for anyone to drive up. So it actually worked out really well because that's a very high trafficked mountain. There's usually tons of people on the peak. But when we went, it was very deserted. There weren't a lot of people there. And so I felt like we sort of had the mountain to ourselves. And my brother came with us. He's the one who got us into hiking, and we had friends. And I would say the thing that makes it worth it the most is, my husband and I have a lot of really fun, interesting memories together, and it brought us a lot closer together and sort of healed things that needed healing, after losing my mom and all of that. I think it changed our relationship.
And how were you specifically changed? How was Amanda changed by doing this thing and crossing this item off?
I think it reminds me that you really can accomplish anything that you decide you want to do in your life. It's just a matter of, not to be cliche, but putting one foot in front of the other and just making small progress over and over and over again. And slowly you get there. And I think I've applied that in other areas of my life and continue to.
Can you give us an example of that, of how you applied that someplace else?
Yeah, I started my own business, and that was a really scary venture. And I started my own podcast, and that's kind of the same thing. I just have decided if there's, I've run a full marathon, and I became a runner. And so when I have an idea of something that like, I really want to try this, I want to do this, then I just know that if I make a plan and follow it, that I can get there.
Awesome. If somebody else wanted to do this and you were sitting at a cafe and you're talking with your husband and your brother and his girlfriend, and someone overhears the conversation and goes, "Hey, that sounds really cool. If I did that, what would be something that you tell me to make sure that I did besides just do it?" Like besides the Nike slogan, what would you tell someone advice wise as far as accomplishing this task?
I would say for the 46, I would definitely read all the trail reports you can find before you go on a hike. There are a lot of different ways you can approach different mountains. There's parking information that you might not know about, or now I think there's permits for certain lots, and that wasn't a thing when we were doing it, but things are changing. It's becoming more popular, and other people can give you such good advice. Some of the trails aren't marked, so they don't have trail markers along the way. And so people will tell you what to look out for on the trail, how far into the hike it's going to be. They have to take a turn. And so learn from other people, and also be patient. Don't try to rush through them. Some of my best memories are from hiking. And I know some people try to do it as fast as they can. And in a way, I'm glad it took us 10 years because it was 10 years of adventures and getting to see new mountains and see new areas that we would not have had otherwise. And I know some people want to get it all done in a year, and that's great. But I think if you savor it, you might enjoy it a little bit more.
Is there a specific tool you used as far as getting those trail reports? I live in the Washington State, and so we have a wonderful, wonderful website that people can leave trail reports and pictures and all sorts of stuff that's run by the Park Services. Is there something like that in New York, or is there something like that specifically for the 46?
I think people have tried, and I don't think we have anything great, to be honest. I have looked at I look everywhere. I Google the mountain. I try to find anything I can before I go. And there's some books on the peaks, but nothing has been perfect in my opinion. I've tried to gather information from all different places, but there are some really great Facebook groups now that, back when we started, I don't think I was using Facebook, but there are some great Adirondack backcountry hikers and some great groups that will give you a lot of advice on the trails.
Awesome. Yeah. Doing research is always an important thing when you're especially attempting a challenge like this and trying to cross
Mhm.
it off. That's awesome. So, Amanda, tell us what's something else that's on your bucket list?
My big bucket list thing right now that I'm working on is I would like to publish a book. And I've been writing for 2 years. I have my first manuscript done. I sent it out to beta readers. So I'm working on revising it right now and hoping maybe by this time next year, I will be able to find an agent or publisher and just taking it one step at a time. But it's a whole new world, just like hiking was for me. And there's a lot to learn. And it's another lesson in patience and realizing that everything is going to take a lot of time.
So, can we ask what that book is about?
Sure. It's a memoir, so it is about my life. And it's about a lot of loss. I lost my mom when I was in my 20s, and I lost my youngest brother. He was 23. And so a lot of family trauma. I have a brother who's incarcerated, and just growing through all of those experiences and being able to find myself along the way. And there is some hiking in there as well, because that was a big part of my healing too.
Awesome. I look forward to
Yeah.
you getting that out there. So, where else online can people find you and get connected with some of the things you're doing? You talked about a podcast and starting a business. Tell us about those
Sure.
things.
Yeah, I'm doing all sorts of things. So you can find me lots of different places. I have a small business, and my website for that is at remembergrams.com. And I basically make personalized sympathy cards and grief support boxes for people in your life who might be grieving. And if you're interested in following me on Instagram, you can follow at remembergrams. Or on Instagram, I have a new page at Amanda Kernahan Writes, and that is for my writing that is just getting going and trying to build a following there as well.
And your podcast.
Oh, yes. And I also have a podcast, and my podcast is called Grief Trails, and I'm available on all the podcast platforms. And most of the podcast posting that I do is under the Remember Grams page. So you can find us there as well.
All right. We will make sure we put all those links in the show notes so that folks can get to them and then some more resources on the 46 for sure. Amanda, thank you so much for being here. And I wish you all the luck in getting that book written. I know what that's like. And so, especially being a memoir, it's kind of tough. I get
Yeah,
that. So, good luck with that. And thank you
thank
for being
you.
here.
Of course. Thank you.